This little guy is adorable because you can, between his hands, put anything, whatever season you wanted. In this particular season, we're going to put in a present because it's Christmas. So he's holding a little gift, and we'll put the bow over his mouth so his mouth won't quite show up as it would normally. There we go. All right. So first of all, we will do an underpainting. And I like to put a couple of extra colors. It's basically brown, but I prefer to put a few other colors in his fur just to make it more interesting. So I'm going to mix up a mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. This is on a porcelain plate, which I just love because it doesn't bubble. Whoa, blue is very strong. So we'll just get a little bit more of this. All right, that should be about the right color. So I have a warm brown and a cool brown. And what I'm going to do is just start with an underpainting. And this, I want it to be just a little bit redder. So just a little bit of red to that burnt sienna. And now I'm ready to go. All right, so first of all, now remember this is an underpainting, so we will just start with his ears. And his nose, his feet, and his hands. And now I'm going to give his fur a little bit of color under here. And the same with his arm, underarm. The shadows are going to be a little bit of a turquoise instead of a darker brown. And that should do it for the underpainting. So now I just need for this to wait. I just need for this to dry. I think now that I've said I'm going to wait, of course I'm not going to wait. Let's put a little bit of a light fur on him, light color. And so that then these colors will blend a little bit, which will make it a little bit more waterly looking. Same with this. And it'll give it a looser look. Leave this part quite light. And also you want to use a warm brown and a cool brown. So over here, then we'll come back in and make it look more like fur. Now I've messed up this part here. So one of the things that I've learned is if you have watercolor where it shouldn't be, just add more water to it and it'll blend out. All right, let's let that dry. The next step with our mouse is to carve out some of the planes of his eyes, just try to drop in some of his eyes. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay down a little bit of water first. always easier to paint that way. And then again, my mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue gives me so much leeway, so much flexibility in the colors of his fur. I really don't need any other brown if I go in this direction. Okay, and so for that, right up against the eye, so where I wet it was right up against the eye. Didn't have to be totally careful because his eye is going to be black. And so I'm just going to lay down a little bit of color in here. Same with this other side. And let it dissipate. So I just put it right up against the eye and let the water take it up. The same thing is going to be true around his nose. So just lay a little bit of water in here. If there's too much water, it will go too far. So use a thirsty brush, a brush that isn't quite dry and not totally wet, just to lift some of the water, because you want to be able to control how far the paint dissipates. So I'm going to lay it right up against his nose and under here, under the painting. And I also want to vary the color even within the color. So I'll just drop in a little bit of a warmer color here and there, no big deal. And the same thing is going to happen here. I've already done it a little bit, but let's get this all the way up here. Now don't worry about his whiskers, because there's two ways of getting the whiskers white. You can use a knife and just cut them through the paper, or you can use an acrylic white pen, which is what we're going to do today. Now this side is going to be a little bit warmer, so I think I'll just add, this is Indian yellow, add just a little bit of warmth to it. And it's not very thick paint. You notice it's almost hardly any paint at all, because I find that watercolor seems to be brighter. People are always talking about how much brightness I can get with watercolor. And the reason is because I use a lot of layers. And let's warm this up a little bit. And I'm going to give it the fur look on the last layer. Okay, so right now all I'm doing is laying color, carving out his shapes. Same thing is true down here. And there's two ways of doing it. First is putting the water down first, which is what I prefer. But if you forget to do that, which I just did, you can lay the water down afterwards, as long as it hasn't dried at all. And I usually use the flat side of the brush. All right, so let's add. And you'll want to do this a little bit darker than you even think you need. Because I have carved out his arm with the water, in other words, I haven't painted over the arm with water, the paint won't go up there and mess around and ruin that shape. Let's be a little bit more specific here. It's good. And then again down here. Now, the reason that I do this in layers, so that I don't lay down all the colors at once, is because I want the underpainting to be set. Then, because otherwise it'll mix together, and sometimes it can get muddy that way. This way, Just lay down some color over the underpainting, and now add the darker colors. Again, I'm going to add some warmth, so a bit more burnt sienna, then blue. And notice I can mix that right on the paper as well. And also notice I'm trying very hard to have lots of different values. That carves out the shapes. Values are more important than actually anything. Here we go. See how we're doing so far. All right, so now I'm going to put his eyes in. And you can mix a black very easily with a really dark red and green. And that is a stark black. So mix this up here. I think I'll make it even cooler and add some blue to it. Notice I've left some white in his eye. I think that adds to his fun. And now I'll just add his little mouth and doing it around the present is not as easy. He looks kind of sad, doesn't he? I have to make him happier. All right, we'll let that dry now. Because I'm working on such a small area, I've chosen to use an Isabi spotter brush. Look at how that end is so short. Lots of bristles at the ferrule, and then it goes straight down to such a small place. So I wouldn't recommend this brush if you're doing anything large, obviously. But if you need to get into a small area, they're just perfect. All right, I think that's going to be better. When that dries, I will make the present look a little bit stronger. And I will also start doing some of the fur, the whiskers, and so forth. Anytime you want a little furry animal, you can use a fan brush. But this one has really heavy bristles. It's not a soft one. And you want to use it with as much of a dry brush as you can manage. So I'm just going to add a few pieces of fur on him so that he actually looks like a furry animal. Just a little bit of water to give it some movement, but drying it off on a paper towel before I get involved. And just bring some little furs in here. And I usually like to use the very edge of the brush. Oh, she's so cute. And it's amazing how the eye will just pick up just these little hints. And this, by the way, is a great way to do anything that has fur in it. And so now I'm going to add a few whiskers. Be very judicious with this because you don't want too much going on. Okay, that's good. Okay. And now it's time to intensify some of the values so that he looks a little bit more rounded. So I'll continue to intensify some of the colors. It's amazing how having a different kind of intensity and value makes the painting so much brighter all over the place. It's really shocking, actually. Just a little bit more color or a darker color here and there makes a huge difference. In what it looks like. Okay. Now, if you're going to put whiskers, white whiskers on here, you have to decide first if you want a little tree behind it. Otherwise, just go ahead and start painting them. I'm going to put a tree back in behind it, so I need to let this part dry. I showed you a Christmas tree earlier with a stamp. This time, we're going to just put a hint of a tree on, not using a stamp, but using the same technique where the water dissipates the tree. Again, you're going to want as much water all the way to the edge in this case, because I don't want it to stop in an uninterrupted way. The tree's going to be on the left side, on his right side, on our left side of the mouse. And it's just going to be a little hint of a tree. Now, because I haven't gone all the way up, into his ear, I'll be able to put the tree in as just a little bit of a hint of a tree. I do want this to be a little bit thicker paint because this is still wet. And a little bit too wet, right? So what are we going to do about that? Simple. Let me get this down here a little bit. And with a little bit of a paper towel, notice that the edge of this paper towel is ragged. See how that stopped right there? That is the kind of thing I would like to avoid. All right, so I'm bringing it back into the shape I want. And then as it dries, I will add more color. What's interesting is that shapes or objects are recognizable by the outline, by the silhouette. So you don't have to worry sometimes too much about all the little details, because if somebody sees a silhouette of something you've done, they get it. All right, let's just get this party started. Make them thicker down in here so that it's more balanced. And also, the heavier the paint down here, the more his whiskers are going to show up. And notice I have this pretty uneven. What I like to do is think about it as a Z pattern. Sometimes if there's water up here and it comes down on your brush, I can't think of anything more irritating. So be sure that little bubble of water isn't there. All right, so I don't want to do too much because I don't want to take away from my little mouse. And now I'll be able to put in a really bright red bow. And ribbon, and I just noticed. Sweet little guy. We'll let that dry and then we'll put in some whiskers. To finish up the whiskers, I'm going to use these jelly rolls from Japan. They come in different widths, 0, 5, 8, and 10. And I'm going to use the 10. Because I already have dark whiskers over it, the white whiskers are going to show. Without the darks, they wouldn't show so much. Right over the tree. Fun is this? And of course, I usually go too crazy with this, so I'll have to stop. Let's bring some down here. A couple down shows his age. And there, let's put some red in here. And there we have it. Isn't that nice?